Tottenham had high expectations going into this season, but things aren't going to plan. Poor results, inconsistent performances, and growing frustration among fans have sparked one big question. Should Robert Vilahamn be sacked? In this video, we discuss whether Vilahamn's system is failing or are the players just not good enough. These are our thoughts on whether Robert Vilahamn should be sacked. Alright, let's get into it then. Today we're going to be talking about Robert Vilahamn, we're going to be talking about Tottenham, and we're going to be talking about whether Vilahamn deserves to be sacked, because Tottenham's performances this season haven't been up to scratch, have they, Harry?
No, they haven't, and I think that for this video, you have to kind of forget about the league table and just focus on what we've seen from Tottenham in the first 3 quarters of the season and how they've actually played, because they've got results, but I don't think that shows us nothing to the way they've played, to the level of performance. But it really has not been good enough, and a really big drop off.
Results obviously play a part, because when we're considering whether he should be sacked, and we will do this later in the video, results do have to play a part. But let's start by talking about performances then this season. Obviously, Tottenham came into this season off the back of what was a really strong campaign last year. They reached the FA Cup final, which they ultimately lost to Manchester United, but they still got there, and they did well to get there. They beat Arsenal for the first time ever. So, and overall, it was a big season. They finished 6th in the end. So, a strong campaign from Tottenham, and they went into this season looking to build on it, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. As you say, after that FA Cup final, Vilahamn signed a new deal till 2027, and everything looked like, I think people looked at Tottenham going into pre-season and thought there's a real chance they could potentially, finish higher than 6, start to challenge the top 4, start to take points off the big side. And I felt like there was a lot of optimism amongst Tottenham fans and amongst neutrals that Tottenham were going to be a force in the WSL this season. They were going to come in. We knew there were some reservations due to the fact they lost Clinton, they lost Bizet, but when we saw Hayley Raso coming in, and it looked like they were going to carry on performances where England and Thomas were still firing at that time. So coming into this season, it really felt that Tottenham were going to be a force to be reckoned with, and well, that hasn't happened, has it?
No, not at all. What would you say has been the biggest issue for Tottenham on field this season?
There's been a lot of issues. I think the main 2 for me. I think one would be the playing football. It seems where I'd put it, but getting the ball from back to front has been so poor. They try and play out the back. They try and make a move work, and the amount of times that they manage to lose it before they get out their half is incredible. They just don't retain possession well enough, because every time they try to come forwards, it gets snuffed out, or they get blocked, or the opposition find a way to stop it. The other thing for Tottenham this season is organisationally they've been horrendous, especially at the back. Last season I agree there were moments like the massive loss to Man City where they looked an absolute shambles, but at times last season it was very organised. It was a really good structured defence that managed to hold on against quite a few teams and remain pretty solid. It's the reason they beat Arsenal at home, because they sat back, they defended well, they had a really good structure, and then they hit a goal on the counter. But they haven't been able to do that this season because their defence has been so unorganised. There's been such a lack of discipline, I think, from defenders, but there's no one across that back line or any defensive players for that matter, that seem to be doing any work to try and organise and to try and lead that back line. The errors keep creeping in. It's just dysfunctional. It's the reason they've conceded so many goals, because they've been so poor defensively. It kind of just cancels out anything they're doing that is positive.
Yeah, indeed. I agree. I think defensively it's been really poor. I think in particular Claire Hunt struggled this season. I mean, we saw it in the Arsenal game. Russo just had freedom because she was able to turn her with ease, and Hunt either let her go or fouled her every time. I mean, obviously the own goal she scored as well didn't help, but that's been the story of her season, really, and that's been really difficult for her and for Tottenham. But nobody in the Tottenham backline has showered themselves in glory. I think there was a slight improvement when they took Ash Neville off on Sunday and brought in Ella Morris. I thought they were better after that, but yeah, it feels to me that it's odd that they're not giving other players a go, because they have got Josephine Rybrink now who can play in the back line. As I mentioned, they've got Morris. It feels to me they've got Lana Beulah can play centre half, so they've got players that should be a bit of rotation. Their defence has been a huge problem, and as you say, ball progression without Bizet, without Clinton, who are very useful in that, or were very useful in that for them last season. They've not really had that this season, so their ability to move the ball from the defensive third, from that build-up phase, into a settled possession phase, into an attacking phase, it's not really there. There's no process, and we saw it particularly against Arsenal with the Suzuki and Maita Oro's pivot,
Yeah.
which was a truly bizarre decision. One, there's no balance. You've got two very technically gifted players, but neither are particularly good defensively, and we saw that with the first goal. Suzuki, not used to receiving under pressure in that sort of position, tries to play then a long ball to bail them out, or a great pass to bail them out. Raso keeps it on the pitch, but she doesn't stay on the pitch, and Arsenal use that ball and they score that first goal. So, yeah, I think as well, the personnel choices this season have been really weird from Vilahamn. So they are underachieving this season. Should it have been expected? Looking at the window they had, losing Bizet, losing Clinton, bringing in Hayley Raso, shouldn't a sort of downturn in performance have been expected?
I think it's a tough one because on the surface of it, yes, they lost some really, really good players, but they brought in two, very well-known Australian capped internationals in Raso and Hunt, and when I feel like pre-season that came in, he thought Raso's back in the WSL, she could really shine. Claire Hunt's been a good centre half, especially on the national stage, and it looked like she was going to come in and shore up the defence. So I think that although, yes, I did expect, if anything, I expected it to go the other way. I thought that they'd slightly worsen in attack. They'd score less goals and they'd look a little bit, less dangerous when they came forward. But I thought they'd look better defensively, especially with the fact that, you think January they've bought in Cott, they've bought in Rybrink, but nothing is just really materialising. If anything, it's not. Claire Hunt was an improvement, and I think that was a massive letdown because Hunt was the big centre half signing that's going to come in and bring a bit more solidity to the back line, and it's just gone the complete wrong way, and that really hasn't worked. And I think for Tottenham, and they also they brought in Suzuki as well. I think there was. I agree that they're definitely. I wouldn't expect them to play as well because they lost such good players in Clinton and Bizet, but equally they did bring in other players that I do think that are still pretty good to at least play better than they have this season.
Yeah. Let's build on that and touch on tactics then. Let's talk about what they're doing this season. So Vilahamn sets up in a 4-2-3-1 most of the time. Though it's a 4-4-2 out of possession, 4-2-3-1 in possession. It's a bit of an odd decision at the moment. They're playing with, at least at the weekend, they played with Naz as the striker and England as more of the 10. And then Naz would I think the point was that Naz is better in behind, but they didn't have anyone to hold the ball up there, and often they didn't have the ball, so they were playing as two strikers anyway. So it's a bit of a weird one in that regard. Vinberg on one wing, Raso on the other. The intent there is that they will be able to hold the width quite well, but again, I don't think we've seen enough from either of them yet this season. Obviously, his style is very much counter-attacking football. We've seen that's how they found success, which I think creates a bit of a problem because when they're not able to counter-attack effectively against the top sides, and then they use a different system against the weaker sides, it's like, well, why not try something different? But yeah, again, I thought that the personnel choices on Sunday were really odd to use a very aggressive team, no defensive solidity in there. Because I think tactically, maybe it's not a massive problem, but the problem is, because in theory, what he's doing should work. But the problem is, it's clearly not being executed by the players, and now that you can argue it both ways. Is that the tactical direction isn't good enough, and that's why we're seeing player mistakes. That's why we're seeing errors. Is it the tactics aren't built for the squad, or is it that the players are making mistakes and making the tactics fall apart? And we'll touch on player performances in a moment. Vilahamn, in terms of a plan B, does he have one? Or is he quite stubborn in how he's used that 1-4-2-3-1?
It doesn't feel like he has a plan B. As we see, you see it quite commonly across football that a manager comes into a side and like Vilahamn did last season, and he had a way of playing, and because no one in the WSL had worked it out yet, they had a really good season where they looked unstoppable at times because sides hadn't worked out how he wanted to play, and they were playing some really nice football. I remember in one of his first games when he came to when Vilahamn and Tottenham came to Stamford Bridge against Chelsea, and they played some really nice football at times, and they actually looked like they could compete with a team like Chelsea. And last season that was really good because sides were still figuring them out.
You contrast that to this season where they barely touched the ball and Chelsea won 5-2, and those two goals Tottenham got were fortuitous.
And that's the problem, is that this season they're trying to play it exactly the same way. Teams have figured them out. And the reaction seems to be like, well, oh well, we're going to keep playing this way and hope that something changes. Once teams work you out as a manager, you have to adapt. It's a problem that we've seen a couple times with different managers, is that once their one tactic gets found out, seeing it a little bit with Vidicic at Brighton, once people know how to play against your side, you have to adapt. You have to find something different that is going to change the game. Because if not, every side will rock up against Tottenham and go, they play that way, they don't change it, so let's do this and we'll win the game. And it's just been as simple as that for some teams this season. Arsenal, they knew what they were doing. They knew how Tottenham wanted to play. They pressed them, won the ball back high up pitch, turned the ball over numerous times in that game, and ended up wiping the floor with them.
Yeah, there's a lot of tactical issues at the moment with Tottenham. Again, it's about how they move the ball through the phases of play, and they don't seem to really know how they're going to do that. Their build-up play in particular is really poor, as you say. Again, I don't think they really know what they're doing there. They just play it to the defensive midfielder. If the defensive midfielder doesn't have an option, she either goes back or tries and sprays a pass forward. But again, there's no clear steps. If we're going to play it here, then we're going to do this, and then players going to drop in here, and it's going to be very difficult to deal with or whatever. It's just play the ball out, and we'll see what happens. It feels there isn't a clear and organised idea of what they want to do with the ball, and there doesn't feel like there's any identity with this Vilahamn Tottenham team. And I think that is a big problem tactically. However, I will caveat that I don't think tactics have been their only problem this season. So let's talk about player performances. Have key players underperformed, or has this been a coaching issue? Where would you attribute blame on player performances?
I think the players have had a quite a significant part to play. Bar Beth England, I haven't really been impressed with anyone in a Tottenham shirt that has been there since the start of the season.
So Lisa Carpen and Heaps.
But they're coming and done well, but they've only played a handful of games. Beth England's been superb. She's been delivering, and credit to her because she's working really well. And
with very little
to
come off.
And I think back to the Crystal Palace game. I think back to the Aston Villa game, where without Beth England, Tottenham would have lost those games. It is as simple as that, because no other player on that pitch would have turned the games around like she did, scoring a double in both of those. But yeah, it's been. Raso has come in and not done very well. Naz, for me, has looked really, really poor, especially when you compare it to her performances last season. Yeah. Marta Thomas, I remember her form at the very start of last season was incredible, but that has just vanished this campaign, and we haven't really seen her do anything. It's been attacking performances have been really, really poor from Tottenham, and it has let them down. Defensively, even worse, but it's a different scenario, because in the forward line you had players who did, like Naz, like Thomas, who did really, really well last season, and that form's just vanished. Whereas defensively, I still think they've got the same issues that just are being highlighted more because they're not winning as many games. Neville, for me, is still struggling. I think didn't think she played particularly well last season, has looked even worse this season. Hunt has come in and, as we've said, has looked really, really poor. Bartrip, again, when you compare it to last season performances, she has played worse. And I think that whoever's the left backs, Nilden, Grant, whoever's played there has always had a shocker. I don't really know what's going on in that position.
It's a weird one, isn't it? Because I think Nilden's quite a good player, but she was torn apart by Caitlin Ford on Sunday. It was a tough watch for any Amanda Nilden fans out there. But yeah, I think player performances have been an issue this season. I will say that in terms of recruitment, I think Tottenham have got it wrong in especially last summer. I think that Hayley Raso coming in, yes, it's a big name, it's good for marketing, and it helps get the fans on board, but a straight swap for Bize and Raso, in theory, they lost Bize and signed Raso. It's not one that I think is beneficial for Tottenham. I think they've lost one of the top creators in the WSL for Raso, who maybe she just needs time to bed in, and that's something that can be spoken about with a lot of the new signings. But I think she's not done anything this season. She's just not looked sharp. I know she had an injury as well for a few months, so there are mitigating circumstances. But I haven't seen enough to justify the outlay they had in the summer to bring her in. I think in terms of the other attackers, as you say, Naz not been good enough this season. I've just not seen anything from her. I think Matilda Wimberg's unlucky she's not been played more, and when she has been played, she's playing too deep. Yeah. She can't attack the fullback if she's playing as a wide midfielder rather than a winger. They need to have Wimberg higher, but the problem is to do that, they play 3 midfielders rather than playing 4 attackers. But yeah, I think there will be a tactical shift soon if results stay like they are. I think it's odd that we've not seen some of the January signings integrated more yet, because you look at how well Lisa Kopp's come in and done. I mean, at the weekend, she put up a 7.1 rating, made a handful of fantastic saves, while all the defence were in the red. So, yeah, I think she did. I think she did well, and I'm surprised. Like Josephine Rybering hasn't come in and got more minutes. Olivia Holt has looked really sharp when she plays. They've not really used her, and that for me is a bit odd. When players on the pitch aren't performing, why not turn to those new signings you've made? There's a reason you've made them. It's because the players on the pitch aren't performing. But yeah, I think there are still some teething issues with players that joined in the summer. I think there's still some tactical issues with what Vilahamn is doing. In total, though, should Tottenham give him more time?
I think so. It's definitely a situation that can be rectified. As we said, if he finds a plan B, if he finds an adaptation that means they start winning games, and suddenly they'll start the performances and they'll start flying up the league. But I do think that he does need his players to perform. Tottenham, Vilahamn and the rest of the team rely too much on the likes of Beth England to just score a goal and get them out of it.
Yeah.
You know, they would have drawn to Palace if it wasn't for a Beth England double and a beautiful free kick from Olivia Holt. So for Tottenham, players need to step up. They need to start performing. Because if they start performing and they still lose games, then suddenly you can start to point fingers at Vilahamn.
Yeah.
But while the players are still underperforming, you have to give the manager some slack that his players aren't doing what they need to be doing. They're not performing well enough.
And again, it's where you attribute blame there. But I think some does lie at Vilahamn's door. But as you say, I think there are some issues with the players. I think while results are where they are, they're at no risk of being relegated. And so I don't really see the benefit of sacking a manager mid-season. That their season is, for all intents and purposes, over. They're out of all the cup competitions now. Yeah. So, yeah, there's no real benefit to sacking him mid-season. I also don't think he'd be able to find anyone of top quality right now. You know, you look at the manager market and it's not exactly bearing fruit. Yes, you could try and take a manager off another team, but there aren't many great options out there right now. So I think sticking with Vilahamn is probably for the best for now. Obviously, if results or if performances continue this way and if results don't start to drop off, then there'll be a different conversation in the summer. But I think right now he's secure in his position. But I think there has to be a wake-up call at some point for Tottenham because underlying numbers place them a lot lower in the league. I think it's closer to 10th or 11th. Yeah. That should be a real point of concern. Most of the games this season, they've been very fortunate. I take the Leicester game, for example. They won that game 1-0. They didn't have a shot on target, which is utterly absurd. So I think that's something that's got to be considered by Tottenham and considered by Vilahamn. They've got to look at how they can improve in that regard.
Yeah, when they bought in Vilahamn, they were looking for... It was for the long term. There's a reason he signed a new deal till 2027. He is in for a good couple of years now.
Yeah.
And they will back him to turn this around. As you say, it's a really weird scenario to be in, where they are still... They're sat sixth in the league, which is a really strong position. But they've got really fortunate at times this season, and if they keep trying to ride their luck, they will drop down the table because there are a lot of teams below them, like West Ham, Leicester, Everton, Liverpool, who are starting to pick up points now. And suddenly, in 8 games' time, when we get to the end of the season, Tottenham could find themselves in 10th, and then suddenly Vilahamn for me would be in big trouble. So they've got to find something. They've got to try and put a really good run together in these last 8 games, and they could finish 5th. That is the reality of it. Whereas if they keep playing the way they're playing, they could end up in the bottom 3. But if they start to pick up performances, there's a good chance they finish in the top 5. Yeah. And that would be a sensational season. It'd be an improvement on last campaign, which feels crazy to say. But that's where we are at with the WSL right now, is that just if you put a good run together, you can see yourself climb. They need to find some consistency because the performances have just been so hit and miss. But I think Vilahamn's a good coach, and if he can get his side back playing football at a top level, then they could end up being a really difficult side once again, like they were last season. You know, last season they deserved to get to the FA Cup final, and they played some beautiful stuff. If they can get back to that Tottenham, they will suddenly start to be a team that people are worried about again.
Yeah, I think those merits from last season earn him some leeway, earn him some time. So that is something to be considered as well, how well they did do last season. As you say, if they get back to that level, then they'll be a decent side again. I think it's going to be interesting. They've got the international break now. It's 2 weeks for Vilahamn to work with the players. We were talking about it on stream. There's not a load of them who are going to be on international duty.
Yeah.
Because Beth England must have killed Vegan's cat or something. Yeah. Because if not, I don't know how she's not in the England squad. But there's not a lot of internationals in that team. So they've got time now. They can be on the training pitch, working on tactics, working out what they're going to do when they come back from internationals, because they've got 2 weeks. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do after the international break. There's got to be a response though. Losing 5-0 to Arsenal, utterly embarrassing, and so rightfully there are now conversations around his future. But I think for now he's done enough last season, and Tottenham are in a good enough, healthy enough position in the league for any conversations to reach a similar point where he's probably going to stay in the job for now. But there has got to be some consideration given to other options. I think again though, the manager market's so dry right now.
Yeah.
Who would they turn to? That would be the bigger question, because there aren't really many options. So for now, I think Vilahamn will stay in the role. But of course, do let us know what you think in the comments down below. Feel free to let us know if you think he should stay or go, and if you do think he should go, who would you bring in to replace him? That would be the interesting question. So get involved in the comments down below. Other than that, there'll be another video on screen now, so you can go and check that out. And also check on our community tab, because the other day we were on a show called All About the WSL. So go and check that out. We spoke with Ash and Kai about all things from last weekend. So similar to our weekend review, but we talk more broadly about the women's game on there. So go and check that out. We were guests on that show. Other than that, though, that is everything from us this week. Thank you guys very, very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.